As we know, Julian Assange is home free in Australia, and Matthew Miller, the Count Morlock of the State Department, decided he would run his mouth about a talking point that has been debunked several times over the past dozen years about how Julian Assange's leaks endangered the lives of active duty servicemen and agents and things like that. So here he goes, and then he is challenged by our new hero, Matt Lee, my new favorite person in the world. Matt Lee is the old school scrappy journalist who we're gonna see make an appearance. I might be him for the Halloween show. I might dress up as Matt Lee. That'll be fun. He's my new favorite guy. I love this guy. We'll get to him in a minute. Let's start out with...
I'm sorry, Count Morlock. Just one more question.
Yeah, right, exactly. Just one more thing. Yeah. Here comes Matthew Miller.
I think it is important when we talk about Julian Assange to remind the world that the actions for which he was indicted and for which he has now pled guilty are actions that put the lives of our partners, our allies, and our diplomats at risk, especially those who work in dangerous places like Afghanistan and Iraq. This was some years ago now, almost 15 years ago, so I think the world has forgotten much of it. But if you recall, when Wikileaks first disseminated and published State Department documents, State Department cables, they did so without redacting names.
If you recall, I love how he starts out with this with "if you recall," because when he is challenged on the specifics that he would need to substantiate this claim, he actually claims to not recall. Right.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you would invoke something you don't recall by saying, if you recall. He wasn't expecting to be called out on this, which I don't know why, because these talking points have been debunked over and over again for the last 12 years. And you're in a room full of journalists who are uniquely incentivized to call you out on this. Like, if there's anybody who would know to call you on your bullshit, it would be these journalists, because this implicates them. This guilty plea implicates them.
Yeah, well, this is part of this whole ecosystem that they all function in. It's what Tucker was calling out in the segment we're going to be doing a little later. The media just implies things, or sometimes just straight out says shit that's not true, and it gets picked up by the same people that they're clandestinely working with. We know that partly from WikiLeaks, that they coordinate, that the White House, if it's a Democrat, coordinates with the corporate media, Fox accepted. And they just build narratives. It's very Orwellian. They just repeat false narratives. And that's why when you talk to your lib uncle, they believe a lot of shit that's just completely untrue, unfounded, unproven. Do you remember when they put out the word that the Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian op? Wow, man. I mean, I knew libs who not only believed it, proudly declared it to show that they're on top of this. I'm not falling for that. Nope.
Right, yeah.
Russia's not getting me.
Not this time.
That's how it works. So he's just going to throw that off as a fact. Rachel Maddow will throw it off as a fact. Nicole Wallace will throw it off as a fact, and then your lib uncle is like, yeah, well, a lot of people's lives are endangered. Whose? A lot of people. Why? You don't know anything? You don't know anything?
Right, exactly, yeah. But he does get called on it.
They just threw him out there for the world to see, and so the documents they published gave identifying information of individuals who were in contact with the State Department. That included opposition leaders, human rights activists around the world, whose positions were put in some danger because of their public disclosure. It also chilled the ability of American personnel to build relationships and have frank conversations with them. And at the time, those of you who covered the State Department at the time will probably remember that in the days leading up to that release, the State Department really had to scramble to get people out of danger, to move them out of harm's way. It was an extraordinary effort performed by dozens of government officials around the world, but that doesn't change the danger that those actions put innocent people all around the world in through no fault of their own. And that's, of course, not even to mention the further actions by WikiLeaks down the road to essentially serve as a conduit for Russian intelligence interfering in the U.S. presidential election.
Sorry,
and that's a lot of detail for something you just pulled completely out of your ass.
Yeah, exactly. But
You
here,
see,
here comes.
this is why I'm never getting White House press credentials. I would show up with a cardboard cutout of Wesley Snipes with a sword.
Yeah, right. Well, here comes Matt Lee. Here comes my new favorite guy in the State Department press corps, the White House press corps, whatever they call it. Here he is.
I don't remember there being any public. There was a.
So he says, "Well, I was there at the time."
I actually did cover the State Department back then.
I did cover it,
and I don't remember there being any public. There was a public concern that was raised about the potential security risk posed to sources who might have been quoted. Was there actually any? Did you ever discover anyone who was injured, killed, had to go into hiding because of them?
So a few things about that. One, I can't give you a definitive answer only because I wasn't here at the time and so much time. And
okay,
so, hold on. So,
you just monologued for a minute and a half about all the people who were put in danger. If you recall, you even said if you recall, and now you're going to claim that you can't recall because this was a long time ago.
No, Matt, let me finish. I have a full answer on it. One, I can't speak to that
And with a
because
lot of
some years
detail.
ago. And
Some years ago, yeah, I can't.
Dozens
speak to
of State Department employees had to scramble. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like some shit you have personal knowledge of.
Of course, he says I can't speak to it. It was some years ago. You just did speak to it
in detail.
Yeah, exactly. You just did speak to it.
Matt, let me finish. I have a full answer on it. One, I can't speak to that because it was some years ago, and I don't have a full, accounting of what happened. But
yeah, I just gave a list of accusations that I'm not equipped to substantiate because it was too long ago. So I don't remember what I was just invoking 1 minute ago.
Number two, the State Department did an extraordinary amount of work when we found out that these cables were going to be published.
Like what?
To get people out of harm's way. To
like
go around
what?
And look at what might
like
be.
What? That's what he's asking you about. Like what? Can you say specifically what you're talking about? Because no one has been able to substantiate this claim. And as we'll see in a minute, the judge, when Julian went to formalize his deal, even said there were no victims here. We'll get to that in a second.
Come public and take action so people that would be put in danger would be put out of harm's way. But third, if you drive drunk down the street and get pulled over for drunk driving, the fact that you didn't crash into another car and kill someone doesn't get you out of the reckless actions and the endangerment that you put your fellow citizens in. And it's the same thing, the same principle applies here.
Same thing.
Right. Well, yeah. I don't think that it does. But the fact of the matter is,
of course, it doesn't. Drunk. So revealing war crimes is equivalent to drunk driving. That's what he's saying. It's as reckless as drunk driving. And just because no one was hurt or killed doesn't excuse that.
The State Department has been, at least as far as I know, and maybe I'm wrong, but has never been able to point to anyone who was compromised or killed or put at risk because of this.
Their identities were compromised. The State Department went to great work to get people out of harm's way to prevent that very action from happening.
Do you know how many people about?
As I said, this was some time ago. I was in the government at the time, not at the State Department. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I do know that there was work around the world, especially in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places.
Yeah,
around
Afghanistan,
the world.
Iraq. So what you're saying is people who were committing war crimes were exposed for committing war crimes. And that's just like drunk driving. The act of exposing their war crimes, that's the equivalent of driving drunk. That's just as irresponsible as driving drunk. Of course, this is what they're pissed off about. They're pissed off at the act of journalism that exposes malfeasance. That's that's what everybody's been saying this whole time. That's what this whole case was really about. It was about making an example of a person who caught very bad people in very high places doing very bad things to countries that wanted no fight with us.
Right. Well, this has been their objective ever since the internet turned on them. I can't remember who did this reporting. This might have been Taibbi, or maybe it was Schellenberger. Somebody wrote a series of articles about how the intelligence services really liked the internet when they were using it to foment the Arab Spring. After Trump, their whole attitude towards free speech on the internet shifted because they realized how dangerous this was if it got turned against their interests and preferred habits on the part of the poors and the peasants. And ever since, they've been trying to censor the internet. And part of that effort has been to propagandize the idea that freedom of speech is right-wing, that a belief in the First Amendment is somehow right-wing. And it's been so insidious and very successful with, that was a question I didn't get into. I wish I had now. Although I asked about Assange, which touches on it. So do you believe in a free and open internet? Because the Pod Save America crowd, I guarantee you, would have been like, well, it depends.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
And all of these people, if you would ask them even 10 years ago, would have said absolutely yes. That is how effective this brainwashing campaign has been. And that's an example of it, to say, well, it's like drunk driving. So the idea that what he did is wrong is not open to discussion or debate. That, by definition, what he did was reckless endangerment, even if you didn't actually kill anybody.
Exactly.
They did have to do a great amount of work to kind of move people.
Well, one of your predecessors, P.J. Crowley, who was standing at the podium at the time, went to great pains to talk about the potential damage that could or would be caused by these revelations. And unless I missed it, I didn't hear that there was any.
Yeah, there was not any. There was not any. And don't take his word for it. Don't take our word for it. Take the judge's word for it. So here is Stella tweeting out quotes from inside the courtroom. "You stand before me to be sentenced in this criminal action," Judge Mangliona says. "I would note the following. Timing matters. If this case was brought before me sometime near 2012, without the benefit of what I know now, that you served a period of imprisonment in apparently one of the harshest facilities in the United Kingdom," so this is the judge talking, "there's another significant fact." Again, this is from the judge's mouth in the courtroom. "The government has indicated there is no personal victim here. That tells me the dissemination of this information did not result in any known physical injury. These two facts are very relevant. I would say if this was still unknown and close to 2012, I would not be so inclined to accept this plea agreement before me, but it's the year 2024. So you could not tailor make, if you told AI to generate a rebuttal to what Morlock was saying there, they could not do a better job than what the judge himself said in this courtroom, which was, if this were 12 years ago and I were still under the impression that you put lives at risk or hurt anybody, I wouldn't be able to sign this deal. But now that it's 2024, I can, because the government indicated there is no personal victim here. So, citing this, another journalist turns the pressure up under Morlock.
The sentencing part of the judgment, the judge noted that there were no victims of Mr. Assange's behavior, which is part of the reason that the sentence was what it was. Do you disagree with that? Do you think there were victims of his actions?
I'm not going to speak to a comment made by a judge in a ruling. It would never be appropriate for me to do so, but I stand by the comments I made just a minute ago.
What?
He says that.
You're not going to speak to a comment.
Matt Lee says, what do you mean?
Well, and this is what they do. Look how he falls back on invoking guardrails and norms that don't exist. That don't exist, but they know that the audience they speak to is going to say, "Oh yeah, well you can't comment on anything from a judge. Everybody know that because he said it."
I mean, it's just so absurd. It's your case. It's your Justice Department. It's your Justice Department. It's your case.
No. Of course, when the Supreme Court makes a decision, no one's allowed to comment on it.
Right.
Everybody knows that. Everyone knows that.
This is worse than that. That's its own branch of government. This is not. This is your Department of Justice.
Dobbs' decision, nobody said anything. Nobody said shit yet. Because you're not supposed to when it's a judge. What the fuck?
No, he was just prepared to do that drive-by hit piece. He put lives in danger. He's a bad guy, but he served his time. He just wanted to leave it there. And of course, that's not going to fly in a room full of journalists, even the worst journalists in America. The editorial board of the New York Times said that Julian Assange should be free because he committed no crime. So you really thought you were going to be able to just get away with a quick hit piece on Julian Assange in this room? Of course they were going to push back on this. This is what they do for a living. This is the criminalization of them. Of course they're going to have questions. So if you were this unprepared to follow up with them, you shouldn't have fucking opened your mouth. But he did, and here's... Go ahead.
Well, and when you watch this whole thing, it's really a masterclass in how their job is to be professional liars.
Right.
Because it's like when I went to the Trump rally. Oh yeah, it's tough. People have been waiting out there for 2 days. Yeah, it's very tough. You can tell he's just saying shit. Yes, dozens of lives were compromised. They had to fly people to Peru, and then they lived in a cave for 6 months. Do you have any evidence of that? Well, it's a while ago. Also, President Biden has an IQ of 262. I don't have the papers here. I don't have the papers here, but this is well known. Well, you just saying stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know that he did, but that's exactly the point of my question.
Yeah, I'm not.
Which is that the State Department has never come up, even though it was one of the prime quote unquote victims of these leaks, was never able to identify anyone who was killed or came under.
I think the point I made a moment ago is an appropriate response to that, which is just because the State Department was able to take actions to keep people out of harm's way, people that you put in harm's way, it doesn't absolve responsibility.
What actions did the State Department take?
The State Department at the time was able to reach out to individuals whose names were going to be, I can't tell you that, it's almost 15 years ago, Matt, I wasn't here.
Again,
I know, but
the case has just come to a close.
But I cannot give you a full account of something that happened almost 15 years ago, but people that were here will tell you that the State Department went to great lengths.
Maybe you should have looked into it before you open your mouth then. But of course, that's not the problem. The problem is there's no substance to what you're saying.
Yeah,
it doesn't hold up.
It doesn't matter because his audience won't care.
Right.
His audience is the MSNBC audience. It's the CNN audience. It's the people who applauded Casey Hunt refusing to conduct an interview with somebody who was answering her actual fucking question. That's it. There's no downside for them to make up this kind of shit. They know that the people they're speaking to, the voters they're speaking to, will not pay attention to any of the pushback. They'll only hear what the man at the podium said, and they'll accept it as a given.
Please clap.